what we got here.
Good evening, everyone. Before I call the meeting to order, I would ask that in compliance with New York State regulations, everyone, unless you're speaking, needs to be masked during the meeting. And until we are masked, I cannot start the meeting. I will. It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. You rise and join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda is hearing of individuals and delegations on agenda items. The public comment session, is that better, by the way? Can you hear me better? All right, thank you. The public comment session is for comment, not for question and answer. It is for community members to share their concerns or thoughts with the board. When speaking, please be sure to approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. And if you are representing an organization, we ask that you identify that. We ask that you maintain a respectful demeanor and tone with your comments. Please direct all comments to the board members and not other members of the audience. We are allowing each individual that has submitted a pink card to speak once, and that you ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes out of respect for others in attendance this evening. We also ask that you do not identify individual staff members or students by name. For critical comment, please direct these matters to the superintendent outside of this meeting during school business hours. In the interest of civility and respect of different points of view, please do not applaud or boo speakers. The board will listen to all public comment, but it should not be expected that the board will respond. The superintendent may respond, or we will request individuals submit questions in writing so that we can get back to you at a later time. I do not have any pink cards this evening. We'll move on to committee reports. For the Recreation Board, Ms. Borstel.
Is the meeting tomorrow?
Meeting is tomorrow. DCASB delegate, I attended the September 9th meeting. At that meeting, we passed a code of conduct for the Erie County School Boards Association. We appointed the committees for the year. Programs for the year were reviewed, and the round robin that was presented by each individual board member in attendance. There were approximately 25 members. Very interesting, as always. Legislative meeting, Mr. Polkowski.
Legislative team met on Thursday, and prior to that was part of the subcommittee, which is organizing the tasks that are going to be advocated for on behalf of the districts. There were roughly 25 people in attendance at the meeting, representing probably 13 or 14 school districts. There were a lot of topics of conversation, but again, it was doing an exercise in which we are identifying 3 short-term goals to advocate on with legislators for, and then 7 long-term goals to advocate for.
Thank you, Mr. Polkowski. Budget and Finance, Mr. Kenline's not here. Mr. Massey, anything to report?
Nothing to report.
All right. Native American Committee, Ms. Borstel.
And that is next week.
Next week is that. Thank you. Item 4, Superintendents Report. Mr. McCabe.
Good evening. Quite a few things to cover tonight. I want to start with hopefully is some good information. I've been asked by community members, you know, Mrs. K, you asked early in the school year, what other opportunities there may be for after-school childcare that now that one of our local providers is not able to host a program. Currently looking to see what the district can do almost in a liaison role between the YMCA of Orleans County and Akron First United Methodist Church. Pastor Lanza contacted me, asked me if there's still a need, and I said, I can't speak to that. We're a month into the school year, but I suppose there may be. So What this would be an arrangement where the Y would host an after-school program for Akron families right at the church. The district's role would be to work through our PTA to help communicate this potential opportunity to families. So where we see the PTA with our support could send out information to all the families. This is the K-5 program, by the way, and perhaps conduct a survey to see if it's enough interest. Provided that there was enough interest, then the Y would officially begin the certification process with Akron First United Methodist. Local child care providers that are already doing this, so we want to be good neighbors, but there may just be a need. In terms of pricing, they have a scaled price structure. I believe if you're a non-Y member, it's $130 a month, then $110 if you're a Y member, and then they offer all sorts of supports for families that may be economically disadvantaged and qualify. So I'll keep you abreast of that. I wanted to share with the board that a week ago, Tuesday, September 28th, Mr. Grant, Mr. Polkowski, and two Akron parents that have addressed the board on multiple occasions had an opportunity to meet with County Legislator Christopher Green here in the district. And at that meeting, we all shared some of the concerns we have relative to the health guidance, the inconsistency with those guidance, the impact those have on school operations. And of course, the parents spoke about their concerns relative from a parental perspective. Really, the intent there was, as you're well aware, community members have addressed the board. And there are certain aspects of the community members' concern that the board does not have jurisdiction over, but there are elected officials that do, or work with others to make those requirements. So the intent of the meeting was to offer that opportunity of first step with a small group. So we thank Legislator Green for attending. He was very interested in what all parties had to say. He emphasized to us that he had a meeting coming up with the Erie County Department of Health to address the concerns he heard that afternoon, or that morning, I should say. And he offered to work with his colleagues on the issues that were presented. One of the things that was shared was that I provide the community, frankly, that are here this evening, just some more information about the board's role relative to some of the COVID requirements and essentially where your authority begins and ends. And, you know, I made the comment, for eons, the school districts in New York State have responded to the requirements set forth by the New York State Department of Education. That's always been the role. And when the commissioner's regs change, we sometimes have to adopt policies and practices relative to the educational programming. What's been different with the pandemic is the health regulations have changed, and where they're often most felt is here at school and people's places of work. And so being the most accessible form of governance, it's only natural that our community members come to us and say, what is happening? We're concerned, we're upset, we don't like this. And so it's put boards of education in a place where they want to be responsive to their community, but also, frankly, you don't have the authority to address some of the concerns that they're having. So we had that conversation. One of the community members asked that I speak about that tonight, and I'm happy to do so. A lot has changed since that meeting, quite frankly. You know, here on the campus, that has been to the benefits of our students and our programming, and I'm going to be talking about some of that in a minute. But I just want to thank Mr. Polkowski, who made the original outreach, and Mr. Grant for giving up your time from your jobs to come in, and again, for those parents who presented. At the meeting, Legislator Green was very gracious in saying, you know, these are the other people I work with, and he named them and he was willing to give contact information. So those parents that want to work through those political channels that most readily address health issues could have that opportunity. So all in all, I thought it was a very good meeting. I think everyone walked away with a clear understanding from a parental perspective, a school perspective, and from a legislative perspective. And so I would hope that those conversations continue, particularly with the parents that have come to us for advocacy, that they now have another pathway to support. And so I got some notes of appreciation from the parents who attended. And again, they were very gracious and wonderful. So all in all, I thought a step in the right direction. The other thing that I want to share with the board is just more or less a COVID update. As was outlined in my September letter to the whole community, we're doing all that we can to mitigate the spread of the virus here in school. We've been working with local health authorities, and now we're on the cusp of working with a private contractor to monitor infection rates. So just by way of update, the first major change was the Erie County Department of Health essentially dropping its own unique guidelines and adopting the state guidelines. Probably the most significant game changer for us, because that requirement for 2 individuals in the same location, but therefore quarantine everyone in that location, be it an athletic program or on a school bus or in a classroom, is really what forced us into that position of a temporary closure. The minute that was released, we made immediate responses to adopt those new practices, but we had to do more, because what was really probably in addition to that was the number of close contacts in a cafeteria. In the case of a classroom, all of our kids are 3 foot, they're wearing masks. In the cafeteria, they were also 3 feet, but the contact tracing was 6 feet, unlike the classroom. So one positive case in the cafeteria, in many cases, was taking out 4 or 5 children. And when the county, when the state changed that guidance, the other thing that we did is rearranged our lunch program. This room is used as a cafeteria dining space now, so the kids are further spaced apart, as is gym 2. So to give you a sense of some data, if you will, looking at the week of September 27th to October 1st, 5 elementary positive cases resulted in 23 quarantines. It's a significant ratio. We're still going to get positive cases, but this week we're at 4 positive cases and only 4 quarantines. So you can see 5 cases to 23, 4 to 4, like a 1 to 1, as opposed to almost a 1 to 5 close. Overall, I won't go through overall, but here's some wonderful news. 15 cases in the high school last week, 16 quarantines. We're only at 2 cases so far in the high school. I know it's only Wednesday, but 0 quarantines. So we are seeing, where we were up to 60 kids, in addition to the positive, 35 kids in quarantine and 25 kids positive, 60 kids out. That has dropped significantly. So far this week, there are 8 positive cases district-wide and only 7 quarantines. So the change in the guidance, the changes we made here in school have worked well to start to control the numbers. I've remind the board that one of the things that I put out on that Friday, the 24th, is that we partnered with the Erie County Department of Health to provide free proximal and screening testing. So just by quick review, screening is any parent or staff member that wants to sign up and have the opportunity to have their be tested, they'd be randomly selected one time a week. And then any parent that wants to know if my child is in a room with someone who tests positive, even if they were in close contact, and still want my child tested, that's called proximal. That's also, to my knowledge, we're really one of the first districts in our area that have that in place as of now. I know that other districts are working toward it. We had our first week of that testing this week, and it went very smooth. The results of that testing are communicated directly to the parent. Then finally, in regards to testing, there is an item on the agenda tonight for consideration in that we're seeking to partner with a third-party vendor to provide free COVID testing to those employees that require it as a condition of their employment. So these are the individuals that are required to show proof of a weekly test. There's approximately 35 of them in the district. So right now they have to make an arrangement either through the county or through Rite Aid or through Walgreens, go through the drive-through testing, submit it to the district. They have to do this every week. And my understanding from them, it's hard. It's hard to get an appointment. It's hard to get your results back in time. And, that's not a burden that we would choose to put on our employees, but it is a requirement. So with this potential contract, this is an agency that will come in. That this Delta variant spreads very quickly, and to take whatever precautions you can. So just a little bit of update on where are there. I have one final thing, but any more from the board, any questions on the numbers or things?
Actually, before you move on, I'm going to apologize. We do have a late pink card. Jennifer Salmon would like to talk about quarantine. Has Mr. McCabe addressed your questions?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Jennifer Salmon, would you like to speak on the quarantine?
I'm Jennifer Salmon, and I have a daughter in middle school and a son in high school. First off, I just want to say thank you to addressing the teachers, because my daughter was placed in quarantine yesterday. But the teachers had reached out to my daughter today after I called, and she has work. So thank you, and she's communicating with the teachers. Now I want to go back to in September, my son in high school was actually in close contact with a positive student. However, he was not placed in quarantine here because guidelines were different. He sat right next to him in cafeteria. I kept a close eye on him because I know the parents, and we keep contact outside of school because they're together in school and out. My son never caught COVID. However, now my daughter, yesterday, I get a phone call to come pick her up. She's in quarantine. She was exposed by a student back on Wednesday or Thursday. I understand she's sitting next to her in the class, in the lunchroom. So she's on quarantine, and I understand the rules and everything, but I just don't understand all these guidelines from the state. I actually got a phone call from the state today, and my daughter, they want me to hold her up. She's been exposed. It's been 6 days, and she's negative. I went out and got her tested today, and she came back negative. I'm just frustrated, not at the school, I'm just frustrated at how these guidelines, and they still want me to still keep her in a room with her own bathroom, and it's not gonna happen because she's negative. I would have known if something showed up, a sign. I'm still gonna continue to keep an eye on her, and I know she can't come back to school next week, but This is just absurd. But thank you, Akron, for doing a good job as far as teachers. My daughter can stay on top of her work for the week and not come back overwhelmed and stressed with all the work that would have to be done. Whereas before, I know my son's friends have been overwhelmed coming back to school with having to do nothing when they were in quarantine. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your concerns, Mr. McKay. I apologize for the interruption.
No, that's okay. And actually, the timing, because this is part of my report to the board, the timing of that is perfect for what I'm about to say. The frustration that you expressed is something we feel at school too. Like we want the kids here, and in the quarantine, I think we've done the changes we've made. We've done a really good job at reducing the number of children that are required to quarantine. We want to keep them safe, of course, but by spreading them out in the cafeteria, there's still a chance through close contact in the cafeteria, but we won't be, thankfully, it won't be netting as many. But the point I wanted to make is right now, the current governor, it's been reported at least through the letters and emails that I get, is working more closely with the Department of Health and has a more sensitive ear, for lack of a better word, with school districts and the need to keep kids in. So there are two things that are, it's my understanding, are at the Department of Health now being taken into consideration. And the first is an asymptomatic employee or a symptomatic student. So we know if you're not feeling well in school, you get sent to the nurse. The nurse will say, well, those are COVID-like symptoms, and required to say, you need to go home and you can't come back until you have proof of a negative test, your doctor clears you at something else, or you wait 10 days. Those are the three ways you can come back. The problem is the proof of a negative test can take 5 days. You got to wait 2 days to get tested before you can get an appointment, and you got to wait 5 days before it comes back. If you're out of school or you're out of work, and for a lot of our employees, that's a, there is a leave. If they test positive, there's a leave package from the state, but if they test negative, that's used all their sick days. So it's detrimental to both students and employees. So it's my understanding right now that because they've experienced these long wait times, there's a push to get the rapid antigen test permitted to allow people to come back. Those are usually a quick nasal swab. 15 minutes later, you get your result. If you're negative, you can go back to school or work. Now that hasn't happened yet. It's my understanding that's on the desk of the new health commissioner. And then the second thing, and this actually came up in our conversation with Legislator Green, was the test to stay approach that has been adopted in Massachusetts. And if you're not familiar with that, that is if an individual is identified as a close contact, like say the example that you provided with your child, rather than going home and having to wait 10 days, the parent would have to agree to this, of course, but the school can administer a rapid test every day. So long as every day it's negative, you stay. If it turns positive, then you go. So it's called a test to stay, and that would be in lieu of these long quarantines. So both of those things that, again, I'm just giving you an update. Both of those things are out there. It's our understanding that there's some optimism that the Department of Health will seriously consider this. Again, those would be significant for keeping our kids in school. So should that, I'm sure it'll be front page news if it happens, but if I hear anything sooner, I can certainly communicate it to you. Just moving away from the COVID topic, I just want to acknowledge and send our appreciation and gratitude to our Native American counselors, our administrators, and really on our entire staff on creating the first ever district-wide Every Child Matters Day on September 30th. Our entire staff is wearing orange bracelets. Most of our children, all of our children have bracelets. Most wore orange. And if you're not familiar with this, we remembered and honored the lives of Native American throughout the United States and Canada who are survivors of these boarding schools. And now with the discovery of over 6,000 graves in British Columbia, and really the attempt to change and wipe out this culture, it's just coming to the surface, and it's very time of sadness and grieving for them. But they have reported to me the support that our district showed in recognizing it as a district-wide initiative, which is very meaningful. And I'm sure you probably saw the Buffalo News report on it. There were other districts in our area who do it, and a lot of work went into the creation of it. I just want to say it was a proud moment here at ACS. For the board, we are so close to the end of the capital project. It will be done at the end of this month. There are some minor items left. The graphics on the storefront of the elementary school, some electrical work down in the boiler room, hardware on the exterior doors, wiring up in transportation. I attached to the board agenda a budget project summary. See, we're certainly on budget, not over in any way. And we're ready to wrap up our final payments to contractors at the end of the month. Closed out all the items. As you're aware, when this project was initially discussed, there was a lot of ideas out there on what could be done, and ultimately, prior to my arrival, the district identified the scope of work for this project, but didn't forget about those other ideas for a potential future project. So before we really want to entertain what the next project could look like, it's important that the board get an update on our financial standings. And so we've targeted November 17th for Mrs. Trutter and our financial consultant from Municipal Solutions to come to present to the board financial standing, its capital reserve, and what potential scope future project could hold. And then from there, once we have a more in-depth understanding of that, we can discuss any future project. And it's hard to say in the same breath, we're done and we're considering a new one. You have to understand, from considering to implementing can be 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Any questions from the board on his report? Thank you. Moving on, item 5, personnel instructional. Our recommended actions at the Akron Central School Board of Education on the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, is hereby approved the following instructional items consent 5A to 5C. Move, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Actions at the Akron Central School Board of Education upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve the following non-instructional items, consent 6A to 6G.
Move.
Move, Mrs. K.A.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Bragg. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item 7, district items. Our recommended action is at the Akron Central School Board of Education upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, is hereby approved the following district items, consent 7A to 7C.
Move.
Moved, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Second, Ms. Forstell. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item 8, special education. Our recommended actions at the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon the recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve special education items consent 8A to 8B.
Move.
Move, Mrs. K.A.
Second.
Second, Mr. Polkowski. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item 9, school board correspondence. Thursday, August 14th is the ECASB speedboarding event at Erie Wombosi's from 6 to 8:30. See Mrs. Redmond if you'd like to attend. To register tonight. Thursday, October 21st is the ECASB legislative team meeting, Erie Wombosi's from 6:30 to 8:30. Mr. Polkowski presented an event or an update on the legislative team. I'd just like to recognize his efforts. He's very active in the legislative team, not only locally, but across the state, advocating for our district, our neighboring districts in issues that we face throughout the state. Thursday, November 4th, ECASB Albany update with Dave Little at Erie Wombosi's from 6:30 to 8:30. Space is limited. I believe it's only to 35 participants across ECASB. Please see Mrs. Redmond to register by October 27th. And Mr. Little represents the rural school districts across the state. He is a great speaker and he's a great advocate for districts like us. We are considered a rural district. Saturday, November 13th is the legislative breakfast at Erie Wombosi's from 8:30 to 11:30. Again, attendance is limited. I believe Mr. Polkowski and Mr. McCabe plan on attending. We're limited to 2 participants per district plus a wait list. I've asked to be on the wait list. Our local legislators attend, not only our representatives, but the representatives for all of the component districts. It's a great opportunity to expand that legislative advocacy and have them share the concerns and hear the concerns of the local districts.
If I can piggyback off of that, just so the board is aware, as of the legislative meeting on Thursday, Ed Rath was the only one, Senator Ed Rath was the only one that had confirmed that he was going to be at the legislative breakfast. However, in discussion with Mr. McCabe, I did reach out to all 3 of the other legislators and indicated that that this is a great opportunity to meet their constituents through the school boards and encourage them to attend as well. So.
In the past, we've been able to share a breakfast table with Mike Norris, and prior to that, his predecessor, actually sat with Senator Ratzenhofer as well. So, upcoming dates: Monday, October 11th, Indigenous Peoples Day. There's no school. Wednesday, October 20th is our regular business meeting in the multi-purpose room at 7 o'clock. Friday, October 22nd is the Wall of Fame induction and homecoming events. Item 11, hearing of individuals and delegations on non-agenda items. Input from the public. School board discussion, anything from the board? I have 2 things. One, I'd like to recognize Mr. Massey. He has volunteered and has been appointed the ECASB representative to WNED. So he'll be communicating and sharing with the public television in the area and representing school boards across the area. I received a letter this week from Dave Lowry, the executive director of ECASB. Dave was at our first meeting in September. And as you're aware, he published some updates and shared with all of the component districts his notes on attending our meeting and the other meetings throughout the area. He sent a letter to us really detailing what he liked about our meeting, the parent participation that we had, and he had a couple of suggestions. So I will share that with the board Really, it was about agenda order. It was about the only thing he had for that. We do have a need to go into executive session this evening to discuss the discipline of particular employees. If I may have a motion. Moved, Mr. Massey. Second, Mrs. K.A. Questions or comments?
Motion carried.
We are in executive session at 7:35. We do not intend to conduct regular business. At the conclusion of executive session, this ends the public portion of our meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and continuing to support our students.